understood. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood, feeling blessed.
Hello, 6th grade. Welcome back to your English class. Today is Tuesday, May 26th, and today we are going to review our grammar topics. I want you to be as prepared as possible for our upcoming tests. So, let's begin. So, our first grammar topic was possessive nouns, and we use them when we want to talk about ownership, when someone owns something. So, if you have a singular noun, the only thing you need to do is add that little comma, or something that looks like a comma but it's actually called an apostrophe, and you add an S. So if you want to talk about the sister of Jonah, you would say Jonah's sister. If you would talk about the history of Greece, you would say Greece's history. And if you want to talk about the seats of a bus, you would say the bus's seats. An important exception here, remember that when we're talking about a noun that is singular but ends in an S, like bus, you would still need to add apostrophe S. Now, if the noun is plural, meaning that there's more than one, but it doesn't end in S, it follows the same rule as singular nouns. You have to treat it as if it was a singular noun, so you add an apostrophe S at the end, like children, or women, or maybe teeth, or feet. Any plural word that does not end in S, you would treat it as if it was a singular noun and follow the rule for singular nouns. If the noun is plural and already ends in an S, then we only have to add an apostrophe after the S. Like if you say the kids work, or if you would say the pencil's colors, for example. Let's move on. If two nouns share ownership, we only need to add an S after the second noun. For example, Elizabeth and Megan's birthday is on Friday. Now, they both have the same birthday, so we just have to add an S after the second name, in this case, Megan. If two nouns own two separate things, then each noun has to have an apostrophe S. Like when you say, Germany's and Belgium's flags have the same colors. Each country has its own flag, so they have an apostrophe S to show their ownership. Now moving on to conditionals. Remember, we have 3 different types of conditionals, but we're going to focus on each one separately. So when we're talking about zero conditional, we're talking about things that are usually true, that we can prove to be true. Facts. So, these types of sentences explain what is happening now or what always happens under a certain condition. We always add a comma after the if clause. Remember, the conditionals are characterized by having if clauses, and we separate those clauses with commas. So how do we form the zero conditional? We use if, present simple, comma, present simple. So, like if I say, if it snows a lot, comma, the roads get icy. Now, this is a good example of zero conditional because that is always a fact. Every time it snows a lot, then the road will get icy. So, that works perfectly. And if you notice, your verbs are both in present tense. Snows and get. Second example, or the same example but turned around. Remember, you could have the clauses turned around. You could have the if clause first and you could have the result clause second. The order does not matter as long as you're saying the same thing. The second type of conditional that we have is the first conditional, and we use it to talk about possible results in the present or the future. Now, even if we don't know exactly what's going to happen, we can describe something that is likely to happen. And our grammar construction for this is if plus present simple plus will or won't, depending on what we're talking about, and a verb in the base form or a verb in infinitive form. For example, if it rains, comma, we will eat it inside. Or flipping the sentence around, we will eat inside if it rains. An important thing to mention here is if you're going to use the result clause first, you do not need a comma. As you can notice in the example, we only use a comma to separate clauses if you use your if clause at the beginning of the sentence, like in the example here. If it rains, comma, we will eat inside. Our third type of conditional is the second conditional. And we use it when we talk about future events that are probably not going to be true or probably not going to happen. The grammar structure for this is if plus past simple clause, and then would or would not, and the verb in base form or the verb in infinitive. Example. If I had $1 million, I would buy a Porsche. If I met Queen Elizabeth, I would ask her to have tea with me. Now, again, in the second conditional statements, you could also use the if clause and you could have it come in second without changing the meaning of the sentence. Remember that in these cases, we do not need to use a comma. Example of this, if I won, I would celebrate. We need a comma there because we're using the if clause at the beginning. Or I would celebrate if I won. Now regarding verb tenses, we have several that we have studied and that we reviewed. One of them is the simple present, which is really simple. The only thing you need to remember is that you have to add an S at the end of your verb if you're talking about a third person subject, like he, she, or it. So you say, I walk to school. You do not need an S there because I is not part of your third person subjects. But if you said she, then you would need to add an S in present tense. She walks to school. Keep that in mind for present tense. Present progressive is used when you want to talk about an action that is happening right now at this moment. We added the helping verb to be in any of its forms in present tense, am, is, or are, followed by the verb ending in ing. For example, I am reading a book. He is coloring a picture, or they are working at school. Remember, the form of the verb to be that you use depends on your subject. Am is always used with I and only with I. Is used for third person subjects, so he, she, or it, or any name that represents those. And are is used for you, plural and singular form, and the plural subjects like we and they. Okay? Keep that in mind. And then you add an ing to the end of the verb. Simple, right? Our next tense is present perfect. Now, this one gets a little trickier because you would have to remember the past participle form of the verbs. How do we form it? You use the verb have or has, and you follow it by the verb in past participle form. Now, for this, you have to keep in mind that we have regular and irregular verbs, and that kind of dictates what the past participle form is going to be. For verbs that are regular, your past participle form is simply your verb in past tense. Past simple and past participle are the same for regular verbs. Like the example that I have here at first, I have traveled to Europe before. Travel is a regular verb, so meaning that when you change it to past, you only have to add an ed, and when you use it in past participle form, it stays the same. So it's easy. But you also have irregular verbs sometimes, and those are the verbs that when you change them to past, you have to change the word completely, and you have to learn the new form of writing it. So the same happens when you use past participle forms. For irregular verbs, they all have their own past simple form and past participle form. So we have to learn them. Like the second example I have here, she has not begun her project yet. Begun is the past participle form of the verb begin. Begin is an irregular verb, therefore the past participle form is also irregular and completely different. Now, the present perfect progressive is similar to the present perfect, but since it's progressive, we know that we have to add an ing somewhere. We use it to talk about actions that began in the past but are still happening or are still in progress at this moment. We form it by using have or has plus been plus a verb ending in ing. So I could say she has been listening to music all day, meaning that she started to listen to music maybe in the morning, and that has continued to happen throughout the day. So we have a chart here that I want us to fill out. I will give you sample sentences. You can do different sentences to practice at home if you want to. This is just for you to have an idea. So it says we need to write an example of each type of verb. I believe you already have this solved in your books, but I just want to use it for review, so we'll do some sample sentences. For simple present, well, it's something that we do as a habit or routine, so we can mention maybe something that we do every day. For example, I want to say, I read for 20 minutes before going to bed. That's a good example of a simple present because, as you notice, there are no modifications to the verb. And it's something that it's part of my routine, so it's true. Present progressive, something that is happening right now. I am reviewing the English topics. You have the form of the verb to be, in this case am, plus the verb and the ending in ing. Present perfect is something that started in the past but has not finished yet. It could also be used to talk about something that has an indefinite time. For example, I could say, I have watched the movie. Now I'm saying that I watched it, but I'm not saying exactly what was the specific time, so that's an indefinite time. Now moving on to present perfect progressive, that's something that started in the past and could still be in progress. For example, you could say, I have been studying all day. Okay, so those are some examples just for you to have an idea. Remember that you could always refer back to the videos that we have done discussing these topics. And you can also use your textbook or any notes that you might have taken before. Thank you once again for watching. I just want to say I'm very proud of all of you and everything that you have accomplished this year. We are almost finishing the year, and I just want to encourage you to continue doing your best. I have had the best time being your teacher. I hope that you have enjoyed English class as well. Remember, always strive for greatness.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood.